Marcus Aurelius Maximus, a battle-hardened Roman centurion, receives urgent orders to deliver a military dispatch to Villa Claudius. But a storm and injured horse lead him to the wrong estate, Villa Livia. There he encounters Livia Octavia, a beautiful widow whose husband died in Germania 3 years ago, leaving her childless and facing family pressure to remarry. When Marcus arrives wounded and exhausted, Livia sees it as divine intervention, the gods finally answering her desperate prayers for a child to secure her future. What begins as a case of mistaken identity becomes a profound journey of healing, love, and sacrifice that will test both their hearts and challenge everything they believe about duty, destiny, and the price of happiness. The arrow whistled past Marcus Aurelius Maximus's ear, so close he felt the fletching brush his skin. Another pierced his horse's flank, sending the beast into a panicked gallop through the darkening forest. "Germanic bastards," Marcus cursed, clutching the leather dispatch pouch tighter against his chest. Blood seeped through his chainmail where a spear had found its mark during the ambush. 3 days of hard riding from the Rhine frontier, and now this bandits picking off Roman messengers like wolves, hunting wounded deer. Thunder crashed overhead as rain began pelting the forest floor. His horse stumbled, favoring its injured leg, foam gathering at its mouth. Marcus knew the animal wouldn't last much longer. Behind him he could hear the pursuit, Germanic voices calling out in their harsh tongue, growing fainter but still deadly. The dispatch he carried bore the imperial seal of Emperor Trajan himself. Military intelligence about Germanic tribe movements destined for General Claudius at Villa Claudius, near Tusculum. Lives depended on this information reaching its destination. Marcus had sworn an oath, sealed with his own blood, that nothing would stop him from completing this mission. But the gods, it seemed, had other plans. Lightning split the sky, illuminating a fork in the forest path Marcus had never seen before. His wounded horse chose the left path without guidance, driven by animal instinct to seek shelter. Marcus tried to steer right toward where Villa Claudius should be, but another wave of pain from his wound made him dizzy. He slumped forward, letting the horse choose its own way. The storm intensified. Rain lashed his face like tiny daggers, washing the blood from his wounds, but doing nothing to ease the burning pain. His vision blurred. The leather pouch containing the dispatch felt impossibly heavy against his chest, like carrying the weight of the entire empire. "Just a little farther," he whispered to his struggling mount. "We can make it. We have to make it." But Marcus's words were lost in the howling wind. His horse stumbled again, this time going down hard. Marcus rolled clear just as the animal collapsed, its labored breathing telling him everything he needed to know. The faithful beast that had carried him from Gaul to Germania and back again would go no farther. Marcus struggled to his feet, swaying. The forest spun around him like a child's top. Blood loss and exhaustion were taking their toll. He had to find shelter, tend his wounds, and somehow complete his mission. But which way was Villa Claudius? The storm had disoriented him completely. Through the rain and darkness, he glimpsed a light flickering in the distance. A villa, it had to be. Thank the gods. Marcus stumbled forward, using his gladius as a walking stick, each step an agony that shot fire through his wounded side. The light grew brighter. Stone walls emerged from the gloom, torch flames dancing in bronze sconces despite the rain. This was it, Villa Claudius. He'd made it just in time. Marcus dragged himself to the heavy wooden door and pounded with his fist. "Open, imperial messenger. Emergency dispatch for General Claudius." The door creaked open, revealing not a grizzled military aide, as he expected, but a woman. She was perhaps 25 summers old, with dark hair braided in the Roman fashion, and intelligent brown eyes that widened in alarm at the sight of him. Her stola was richly woven but simple, the attire of a noble household, not military quarters. "By the gods," she breathed, "you're hurt." She looked past him, into the storm. "Are you alone?" Marcus swayed on his feet. Nothing made sense. Where were the general's staff? The military guards? I need to see General Claudius. Urgent dispatch from Emperor Trajan himself. The woman's face filled with confusion. General Claudius, sir. There's no general here. This is Villa Livia. She stepped forward as Marcus began to collapse. You're at the wrong estate. The leather dispatch pouch slipped from Marcus's numb fingers as darkness claimed him. His last conscious thought was a prayer to Mars, god of war. He had failed in his sacred duty. But as Livia Octavia caught the falling soldier and called for her servants, she whispered her own prayer to Venus, goddess of love and fertility. For 3 years she had prayed for a sign, for intervention, for hope. Now, as if delivered by the storm itself, a powerful Roman soldier had arrived at her door. Cassia, Helena. Quickly, she called to her servants, "Help me get him inside. The gods have sent him to us." Thunder roared approval across the darkening sky. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days, his fevered dreams filled with Germanic war cries and the weight of imperial duty pressing down on his chest like a stone. When he finally opened his eyes fully, the first thing he saw was Livia's face hovering above him, concern etched in every line. "You're awake," she said softly, setting down a clay bowl of steaming broth. "Thank the gods, your fever broke during the night." Marcus tried to sit up, but winced as pain lanced through his side. The room spun slightly before settling into focus. This wasn't a military infirmary. The walls were painted with delicate frescoes of gardens and nymphs, and the bed beneath him was softer than anything he'd experienced in 15 years of military service. Where am I?" His voice came out as a croak. "Villa Livia, near Tusculum. You collapsed at my door 3 nights ago." Livia helped him drink water from a silver cup. "You were delirious with fever. Kept calling out about a General Claudius and some urgent dispatch." Marcus's hand flew instinctively to his chest, but found only bandages beneath a soft sleeping tunic. Panic seized him. "The pouch, where's the dispatch pouch?" "Safe," Livia assured him quickly. "I have it secured in my private chambers. The imperial seal is intact." She studied his face carefully. "You said you were looking for General Claudius." "There's no military installation here, soldier. The nearest garrison is at Tusculum, 10 miles south." Marcus closed his eyes, trying to piece together his fragmented memories. The storm, the wrong path, the collapsed horse. He had somehow taken a wrong turn in the forest and ended up at the wrong villa entirely. "How long have I been here?" 3 days. I sent word to Tusculum that a Roman soldier was recovering here. But she hesitated. The storm washed out the bridge on the main road. No one can travel until repairs are made. A convenient lie, though Marcus didn't know it. The bridge was perfectly intact, but Livia had bribed the messenger to say otherwise, buying herself precious time. She told herself it was for Marcus's health. Moving him too soon could reopen his wounds. "I have to go." Marcus struggled to rise again. "The dispatch, it's urgent military intelligence. Every day I delay could cost lives." "You can barely sit up without help," Livia said firmly, pressing him back down. "Your wound was deep. If you tear it open now, you could bleed to death before reaching the road." She smoothed the blanket over him with gentle hands. "Rest. Heal. The Empire has survived without this one dispatch for 3 days. It can survive a few more." Despite his warrior's training, Marcus found himself relaxing under her ministrations. When had anyone last cared for him like this? In the legions, wounded soldiers were patched up quickly and sent back to duty or invalided out if too badly hurt. There was no time for gentle hands or concerned faces. "What's your name?" he asked. "Livia Octavia." She settled into a chair beside the bed, picking up a piece of embroidery. "And you're Marcus Aurelius Maximus. I found your military identification among your effects. You know my rank? Centurion of the 1st Cohort, 5th Legion." Her voice carried a note of respect. "You've served with distinction in Dacia and Germania. Your decorations tell quite a story." Marcus was surprised she could read military insignia so accurately. Most civilian women knew little of such things. "You seem well versed in military matters." A shadow passed over Livia's face. "My late husband was a tribune, Lucius Octavius. He fell at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest 3 years ago." "I knew Lucius," Marcus said quietly. "He was a good officer, brave. I was sorry to hear of his loss." Tears welled in Livia's eyes, but she blinked them back. "He spoke of you once in his letters, said there was no finer soldier in the legions." She set down her embroidery and looked at him directly. "Is it strange that I should feel the gods brought you here? On the anniversary of his death, no less." Marcus frowned. Anniversary 3 days ago marked exactly 3 years since the battle, where he fell. I was praying that night, praying for a sign, for guidance about my future." She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the peaceful villa ground. "And then you appeared at my door like something out of legend." The pieces were falling into place in Marcus's mind, though he didn't like the picture they formed. A childless widow, under pressure to remarry. A mysterious soldier, arriving at precisely the right moment. He had heard stories of desperate women who believed they could manipulate fate itself. "Livia," he said carefully, "what exactly were you praying for?" She turned back to him, and in her eyes he saw a vulnerability that cut straight to his heart. "The Octavian family has been patient with me, but patience has limits. They want an heir to carry on Lucius's name. If I can't provide one," she shrugged helplessly, "they'll choose a husband for me, someone who can. And you think the gods sent me to give me a son?" The words hung in the air between them like an incantation. "I know how it sounds, but Marcus, I've made offerings at every temple from here to Rome. I've consulted the oracles, performed every ritual. Nothing. And then you arrive, wounded and alone, on the very night I was begging Venus for intervention." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with his wounds. This woman, beautiful, intelligent, kind, was looking at him not as a person but as an instrument of divine will, a means to an end, no matter how sweetly she might dress it up. "And not some sacred bull brought for sacrifice," he said more harshly than he intended. "I'm a Roman soldier with duties and obligations. The moment I'm well enough to travel, I leave." Hurt flashed across Livia's features before she composed herself. "Of course, I didn't mean to imply." She smoothed her stola nervously. "I only thought perhaps the gods work in mysterious ways. Perhaps your delay here serves both our purposes. My purposes don't include siring bastards for convenient widows." The words came out crueler than Marcus meant them. He expected anger, tears, perhaps banishment from her villa. Instead, Livia simply nodded slowly. "You're right to be suspicious," she said quietly. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." She moved toward the door, then paused. "But Marcus, I want you to know something. When I saw you collapsed at my door, bleeding and alone, my first thought wasn't about my own problems. It was fear that you might die before I could help you." She left him alone with that thought and a bowl of cooling broth. Marcus stared at the ceiling, fighting conflicting emotions. Duty demanded he leave immediately, wound or no wound. The dispatch he carried could affect the entire German frontier. Every hour of delay potentially cost Roman lives, but when he closed his eyes, he saw Livia's face as she tended his wounds, not scheming or manipulative, just genuinely concerned for his welfare. He thought of her gentle hands changing his bandages, her voice soft with worry during his fever dreams. Perhaps he was the one being unfair. Perhaps she truly did see his arrival as divine intervention, but that didn't mean she was trying to trap him. Maybe she was just a lonely woman grasping for hope in a world that gave women precious few choices. Outside his window, he could hear her voice speaking to the servants about dinner preparations. There was no hint of anger or hurt in her tone, despite his harsh words. She was simply carrying on, managing her household, caring for her unexpected guest. Marcus touched the bandages covering his wound. The healing was remarkably good, better than he'd have received from army surgeons. She had genuine skill as a healer, along with access to the finest medical supplies money could buy. A thought struck him. When he'd asked about the dispatch pouch, she had said it was safe in her private chambers with the imperial seal intact. She could have opened it, read its contents, even sold the intelligence to Germanic agents for a fortune. Instead, she had protected it carefully, waiting for him to recover. That wasn't the behavior of someone trying to manipulate him. That was the behavior of an honorable woman caught in desperate circumstances. He made a decision that surprised him. He would stay until his wounds healed properly, perhaps a week, maybe two. Not because he believed in her divine intervention theory, but because she deserved better than his suspicion and harsh words. She had saved his life, after all, and if during his recovery they found comfort in each other's company, well, stranger things had happened. The gods worked in mysterious ways indeed, but he would not forget his duty. The dispatch would reach Villa Claudius, even if he had to crawl there himself. Some obligations were more sacred than desire. As if summoned by his thoughts, Livia appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray of food that smelled like heaven itself. "I brought dinner," she said simply. "Are you strong enough to feed yourself, or do you need help?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Really look. She was beautiful, yes, but it was a beauty tempered by intelligence and strength. This was a woman who had managed an estate alone for 3 years, who had tended his wounds with expert skill, who had treated him with kindness despite his harsh words. "I think I can manage," he said, accepting the tray. "Livia, I owe you an apology. What I said before was honest," she finished. "You have no reason to trust me. I'm a stranger with my own agenda." She settled back into the chair beside his bed. "But perhaps we can start over, just as two people thrown together by circumstance, making the best of an unexpected situation." Marcus found himself smiling for the first time in months. "I'd like that." They shared the meal and talked of small things. The villa's history, his experiences in the legions, her late husband's letters. Marcus felt something loosening in his chest. Not duty, never that, but the crushing loneliness he'd carried for so many years began to ease slightly. Outside, night fell over the villa, and for the first time since arriving, Marcus didn't dream of Germanic war cries and imperial dispatches. Instead, he dreamed of gentle hands and brown eyes filled with hope. A week passed in a haze of healing and unexpected intimacy. Marcus's strength returned gradually, aided by Livia's skilled care and the villa's peaceful atmosphere. Each morning she would change his bandages, her touch gentle but clinical, though he began to notice the way her breath quickened when their skin touched, the way her eyes lingered on his face when she thought he wasn't looking. On the 8th day, Marcus was finally able to walk the villa's gardens without assistance. The morning sun felt warm on his face as he moved slowly along the colonnade, admiring the carefully tended roses and herb beds. This was a far cry from the muddy camps and blood-soaked battlefields he'd called home for 15 years. "You look stronger today," Livia said, joining him by a fountain where carved dolphins spouted clear water into a marble basin. She carried a small bundle wrapped in silk. "Thanks to your care." Marcus flexed his shoulder carefully, testing the range of motion. "The wound barely troubles me now. I should be able to travel soon." He saw her smile falter slightly before she recovered. "Of course, your duty calls." She held out the silk bundle. "I thought you might want this back." Inside was his pugio, his military dagger, along with his centurion's vine staff and the oak leaf crown he'd earned for saving a fellow soldier's life in Dacia. All had been carefully cleaned and polished. "You didn't have to. A soldier's weapons are sacred." Livia said simply, "They deserve respect." She watched him strap on the dagger, his movements automatically professional despite his recent injuries. "Will you tell me about it?" The oak crown. Marcus fingered the golden leaves, memories flooding back. Battle of Sarmazegetusa. A young legionnaire, barely 18, took a Dacian spear meant for our standard-bearer. Would have bled out if I hadn't gotten him to the surgeons. He shook his head. He lived to fight another day. Probably has sons of his own now, and you've been fighting ever since. Never married, never had children. The question was carefully casual, but Marcus heard the underlying curiosity. The legions don't encourage permanent attachments. We're married to Rome, they say. He looked at her directly. What about you? Did you and Lucius want children? Pain flickered across Livia's features. We tried for 5 years. I consulted every physician from here to Alexandria, performed every fertility ritual known to the gods. Nothing. She sat on the fountain's edge, trailing her fingers in the water. Lucius never blamed me, but I could see the disappointment in his family's eyes. An Octavian wife who couldn't produce an Octavian heir, and now they pressure you to remarry. Marcus Octavius, Lucius's brother, has made it clear my widow's rights are temporary. Her voice hardened with anger. He has a candidate in mind. Gaius Brutus Mercator, 53 years old, already has 3 wives and 7 children, but he needs political connections. She laughed bitterly. I would be a broodmare with a dowry, nothing more. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger that surprised him. Surely you have legal rights. In theory, yes. In practice, she shrugged. I'm a woman without male protection. The Octavians control my late husband's estate, my inheritance, even this villa. They've been patient because forcing me into marriage too quickly would look bad, but patience has limits. They walked in comfortable silence toward the villa's scriptorium, where Livia kept her personal library. Marcus was impressed by the collection scrolls of poetry, philosophy, history, even technical treatises on agriculture and medicine. You read extensively, he observed, examining a copy of Virgil's Aeneid. Books were my companions during the lonely years after Lucius died. Livia pulled out a scroll and unrolled it carefully. This one became particularly meaningful. Marcus read the passage she indicated, Dido's lament from the Aeneid, where the Carthaginian queen speaks of love, found and lost, duty versus desire, the impossible choices faced by those caught between personal happiness and larger obligations. Dido understood. Livia said quietly, she loved Aeneas, but duty to his destiny took him away. Sometimes I wonder if all great loves are doomed by duty. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Marcus found himself thinking of his own duty, the dispatch still hidden in Livia's chambers, the mission that would eventually call him away from this peaceful interlude. Perhaps, he said carefully, some duties can be postponed, if the circumstances warrant. Livia's eyes met his, hope and desire mingling in their depths. The bridge repairs will take at least another week, she said, though they both knew she could have it fixed in a day if she truly wanted. Your wound still needs tending. Yes, Marcus agreed, stepping closer to her. It does. When she reached up to touch his face, he didn't pull away. When her lips met his, soft and tentative at first, then with growing hunger, he kissed her back with 15 years of suppressed loneliness pouring out. They broke apart, breathing hard, awareness crackling between them like lightning. Marcus, she whispered, I need you to know this isn't just about my situation with the Octavians. What I feel for you, I know. He cupped her face gently. I feel it too. But even as they held each other, Marcus's eyes fell on a small shrine in the corner of the scriptorium. Statues of the household gods gazed down at them with marble eyes, and among them he recognized figures of Mars and Victoria, gods of war and victory, reminders that duty could not be forever denied. That night, they became lovers in truth. Livia came to his chamber after the household had retired, moving like a whisper through moonlit corridors. What happened between them was passionate but tender, desperate but careful, as if they both knew they were stealing time from fate itself. Afterwards, as Livia lay sleeping in his arms, Marcus stared at the ceiling and fought with his conscience. Every day he delayed increased the danger to Roman forces on the German frontier. The dispatch he carried contained troop movements, supply routes, intelligence that could save lives or lose battles depending on how quickly it reached its destination. But when Livia stirred and smiled at him in the darkness, when she whispered his name like a prayer, duty seemed a distant and cold master compared to the warm reality of the woman beside him. 3 more days passed in this stolen paradise. They walked the gardens at dawn, shared meals in comfortable intimacy, talked late into the night about dreams and fears, and the strange turns of fate that had brought them together. Marcus found himself laughing more than he had in years, while Livia seemed to glow with happiness. It was on the 4th night that everything changed. Marcus woke to find Livia's place beside him empty. Concerned, he rose and searched the villa, finally finding her in the atrium, kneeling before a shrine to Venus. She was praying softly in Latin, making offerings of wine and flowers. He was about to speak when her words stopped him cold. "Great Venus, goddess of love and fertility, I thank you for sending this man to me. Grant that his seed takes root in my womb, as his love has taken root in my heart. Let me carry his child, that I might be free of the Octavians' threats and secured in my own home." Marcus felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. All their tender moments, all the growing love between them. Had it all been manipulation after all? Was she simply a better actress than he'd given her credit for? But then he heard the rest of her prayer, spoken so softly he almost missed it. "And Venus, if it is your will that he must leave me for his duty, grant me the strength to let him go with love, rather than bitterness. Let me not become like Dido, destroyed by loss. Let me remember joy rather than sorrow." Marcus's anger dissolved as quickly as it had formed. This wasn't legitimation. This was a woman trying to reconcile her desperate practical needs with genuine emotions. She wasn't scheming to trap him. She was praying for the courage to release him if necessary. He stepped back into the shadows and returned to bed. But sleep eluded him. By dawn, he had reached a decision that surprised him with its clarity. When Livia returned to his chamber, he was waiting for her. "We need to talk," he said gently. She stiffened, perhaps sensing the change in his mood. "If this is about leaving, it's about staying." Marcus pulled her down beside him on the bed. "Livia, I heard your prayer last night." Color drained from her face. "Marcus, I can explain. You don't need to." He took her hands in his. "I understand your situation better than you know, and I want you to understand mine." He told her then about his childhood, born a bastard in the slums of Subura, sold to the legions at 14 to pay his mother's debts. How he'd clawed his way up through the ranks, through skill and determination, earning respect, but never belonging, never having a true home or family. 15 years I've served Rome," he said. 15 years of following orders, moving where I'm told, fighting wars for causes I barely understand. I've been loyal and dutiful and empty inside." He touched her face tenderly. "Until now, until you." Tears slipped down Livia's cheeks. "But your duty, the dispatch, will reach its destination. But perhaps not immediately." Marcus made his choice with the same decisive clarity that had served him in battle. "I'm requesting extended medical leave to recover from my wounds. A month, maybe 2. Time for us to see if what we have is real or just 2 lonely people finding comfort. And if it's real," Marcus smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years, "then we'll face whatever comes together. The Octavians, the legions, the gods themselves if necessary." Livia threw her arms around him, sobbing with relief and joy. "I love you," she whispered against his neck. "Not for what you can give me, but for who you are." "And I love you," Marcus replied, meaning it completely. "Whatever happens, remember that." But even as they held each other and planned for a future together, neither could see the messenger riding hard toward Villa Livia. a messenger bearing news that would shatter their fragile happiness and force Marcus to choose between love and honor in the most impossible way. The stolen time was running out. The messenger arrived at dawn on Marcus's 20th day at Villa Livia, his horse lathered with sweat and foam. Marcus was in the garden practicing sword forms to regain his strength when he heard the thunder of hooves on the villa's stone courtyard. Something cold twisted in his gut, a soldier's instinct honed by years of war. No one rode that hard with good news. Marcus Aurelius Maximus, the rider called out, still mounted, his red military cloak marking him as an imperial courier. By order of General Claudius, you will report immediately. Marcus set down his practiced sword, his mind racing. How had they found him? He'd sent word of his location to Tusculum garrison, claiming extended recovery from wounds, but had specified no visitors. Livia emerged from the villa's entrance, her face pale. Behind her came Cassia and the other servants, drawn by the commotion. The messenger's hard eyes swept over them, dismissively before fixing on Marcus. Centurion, you were expected at Villa Claudius 18 days ago. General Claudius demands an explanation for the delay of critical intelligence. I was wounded, Marcus said evenly, though his heart was pounding. Ambushed by Germanic raiders. My horse died. I've been recovering from. Recover on your own time. The messenger snapped. He pulled out a sealed scroll and threw it at Marcus's feet. New orders. You're to accompany me immediately to the Rhine frontier. General Verus is mounting an emergency expedition based on intelligence you were supposed to deliver weeks ago. Marcus picked up the scroll with hands that trembled slightly. The seal bore not just General Claudius's mark, but the personal eagle of Emperor Trajan himself. This wasn't a routine reassignment. This was an imperial command. As he read, the blood drained from his face. The Germanic tribes were massing for a massive assault on Roman settlements along the Rhine. The intelligence he'd been carrying contained crucial details about their numbers, battle plans, and timing. Without that information, Roman commanders had been operating blind, making critical mistakes. 3 legions had been caught in an ambush near Mogontiacum. 2,000 Roman soldiers dead, 5,000 more trapped and under siege. The emergency expedition was a desperate rescue mission, and they needed every experienced centurion they could get. Sweet Jupiter, Marcus whispered. His delay, their stolen weeks of happiness, had cost lives. Roman blood was on his hands. You understand the gravity now, the messenger said coldly. General Verus specifically requested you for the rescue force. Your reputation for impossible missions precedes you. He glanced at Livia with obvious disdain, though apparently that reputation needs updating. Rage flashed through Marcus, but he controlled it. The messenger was only doing his duty. The fault lay with Marcus himself, with his choice to put love before obligation. How long do I have to prepare? He asked. We leave within the hour. Bring only essential gear. The messenger finally dismounted, accepting water from one of Livia's servants. General Claudius was quite specific. No delays, no excuses. The lives of 5,000 Romans hang in the balance. Marcus felt the world tilting around him. An hour. After 20 days of stolen paradise, he had 1 hour to say goodbye to the only real happiness he'd ever known. He turned to Livia, seeing his own devastation reflected in her eyes. She understood as clearly as he did. This wasn't a temporary assignment. This was a suicide mission, the kind of desperate gamble that earned either glory or death, with little middle ground. I have to go, he said quietly. She nodded, her face composed, despite the tears threatening to spill. I know. Livia, pack your things, she said firmly. We'll talk while you prepare. In his chamber, Marcus moved with mechanical efficiency, rolling his few belongings into a military pack. His armor, cleaned and repaired by Livia's servants, his weapons, sharp and ready. The oak leaf crown that had once meant so much and now seemed like a child's toy. Livia worked beside him silently, helping fold his traveling cloak, checking that his medical supplies were complete. Her hands shook only slightly. "The dispatch," Marcus said suddenly. "I need to retrieve it." "Already done." Livia pulled the leather pouch from beneath his spare tunic. The imperial seal was still intact. "I've been keeping it safe." Marcus stared at the pouch that had brought him here, that was now taking him away. If he had delivered it immediately upon arrival, thousands of Roman soldiers would still be alive. His duty to Rome had always been clear and absolute. His weakness, his selfish desire for love and happiness, had betrayed that duty catastrophically. "This is my fault," he said heavily. "All those dead soldiers." "No." Livia's voice was fierce. "You were wounded, alone, nearly dead when you arrived. You did nothing wrong by taking time to heal. I took weeks, not days. We both know why. Because we found something worth having." She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her ears. "Marcus, don't let guilt poison what we shared, what we share." He wanted to believe her, but the weight of Roman lives lost pressed down on him like a mountain. How could their love, however real, justify such a cost? "I may not come back," he said quietly. "These rescue missions, the odds aren't good." "I know." Her voice was steady, but tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "That's why we can't waste what time we have on regret." She pulled him down to her and kissed him with desperate intensity, as if she could somehow seal their love into his memory through will alone. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "If you do come back," she whispered, "I'll be here, waiting, for as long as it takes. And if I don't, then I'll remember every moment we had, every laugh, every touch, every word of love." She pressed something into his hands, a small silver amulet bearing the image of Venus. "Keep this with you. Let it remind you that someone loves you completely and without reservation." Outside they could hear the messenger calling impatiently. Time was up. Marcus strapped on his armor, with practiced speed. The familiar weight settling on his shoulders like an old burden resumed. When he picked up his centurion's helmet with its distinctive transverse crest, he caught sight of himself in Livia's bronze mirror. The man looking back was a Roman soldier again, hard, professional, ready for war. The gentle lover who had walked in gardens and laughed over shared meals might have been a dream, but the silver amulet, pressed against his chest, warm from Livia's touch, proved it had been real. They walked to the courtyard together, neither speaking. The messenger was already mounted, his horse dancing impatiently. Marcus's own mount, a sturdy military gelding provided by the garrison, stood ready. "Centurion," the messenger barked, "we have a schedule to maintain." Marcus swung up into the saddle with fluid grace, muscle memory taking over. He was a soldier again, bound by duty and oath. But when he looked down at Livia standing in her courtyard, surrounded by servants who had become like family, he felt his heart breaking. "I love you," he said simply, not caring that the messenger could hear. "And I love you." Livia's voice carried clearly across the courtyard. "Come back to me, Marcus Aurelius Maximus. Come back home." Home. The word hit him like a physical blow. In 20 days, this villa had become more of a home than anywhere he'd lived in. 34 years of life. These people, Livia, Cassia, even the stable boys and kitchen maids, cared about him as a person, not just as a tool of war. But Rome called, and Marcus had sworn sacred oaths. His personal happiness could not outweigh the lives of 5,000 trapped soldiers. He saluted Livia formally, a centurion's farewell to a Roman matron, then wheeled his horse toward the road. The messenger fell in beside him and they galloped away from Villa. Livia, as the morning sun climbed higher. Marcus didn't look back. If he had, he would have seen Livia collapse to her knees in the courtyard, finally allowing her composed facade to crumble as she wept for the man she loved and might never see again. The ride to the Rhine frontier took 6 days of brutal pace, changing horses at military way stations. Marcus barely spoke to the messenger, lost in dark thoughts about duty and consequence. Each mile took him further from Livia and closer to a battle he might not survive. On the 3rd day, They met up with the main rescue force, 2,000 hardened legionaries under General Varus himself. Marcus recognized many of the officers, men he'd served with in Dacia and Britain. Their faces were grim, marked by the knowledge that they were riding to almost certain death. "Marcus," General Varus clasped his shoulder with genuine warmth. "Thank the gods you're here. We'll need your experience for what's ahead." The plan was desperate in its simplicity. The trapped legions were surrounded in a forest stronghold near Mogontiacum, running low on supplies and hope. The Germanic tribes had them outnumbered 5-1, with more warriors arriving daily. A direct assault would be suicide, but Marcus specialized in impossible missions. "There's a ravine on the western approach," Marcus explained, studying the crude maps by firelight. "If a small force could get through there at night, we might be able to create enough chaos to allow the main rescue force to break through." "How small a force?" Varus asked. 20 men, maybe 30 if we're lucky." "Suicide odds." "Yes, sir, but it's the only chance those trapped legions have." Varus nodded grimly. "Who leads this suicide mission?" Marcus met his general's eyes steadily. That night, as Marcus prepared his equipment for the infiltration mission, he found himself thinking not of glory or duty, but of Livia's face when he'd ridden away. The silver amulet seemed to burn against his chest, a reminder of love found and perhaps lost forever. If he died tomorrow, and he probably would, at least he would die having known what it meant to be truly loved. 20 days of happiness might be a poor trade for 34 years of emptiness, but it was something real to carry into whatever darkness awaited. Marcus whispered a prayer to Mars for strength and to Venus for protection, then settled down to wait for the mission that would likely be his last. In the distance, Germanic war drums echoed through the forest like the heartbeat of some primordial beast. Tomorrow would bring blood and steel, and probably death, but tonight he could still remember the scent of roses in Livia's garden and the sound of her laughter echoing through marble halls. The night infiltration began under a moonless sky, with Marcus leading 29 volunteers through terrain that seemed designed by the gods to kill Romans. The ravine was treacherous, loose rock that could betray their position with a single misstep, thorny undergrowth that caught at armor and skin, and the constant threat of Germanic sentries, who knew these woods like lovers knew each other's bodies. Marcus moved like a ghost through the darkness, every sense heightened by years of survival. Behind him, his hand-picked team followed in perfect silence, men who trusted him enough to follow him into almost certain death. They were all volunteers, all veterans, all men with nothing left to lose except honor. The silver amulet pressed against Marcus's chest as he crept forward, and for a moment he allowed himself to think of Livia sleeping peacefully in her villa. Was she dreaming of him? Did she know that her love had given him something precious to fight for? Not just Roman glory, but the hope of returning to something beautiful. A Germanic sentry appeared ahead, silhouetted against the stars. Marcus moved with deadly precision, his dagger finding the man's throat before he could cry out. One life taken to save thousands, the brutal mathematics of war. "Contact in 2 minutes, he whispered to his second in command. Gaius Brutus, not the politician who wanted to marry Livia, but a grizzled opsher from the Rhine legions. Remember, maximum chaos, minimum exposure. Get them looking the wrong way, then we extract fast." The trapped Roman camp was a pitiful sight when they finally reached the perimeter. 3 legions reduced to perhaps 1,500 effective fighters, surrounded by a sea of Germanic campfires that stretched to the horizon. The enemy outnumbered them 10-1 now, with more arriving every hour. Marcus's plan was elegantly simple. His team would attack the Germanic supply depot from the east, creating enough noise and confusion to draw their attention away from the main Roman force. Meanwhile, General Varus would punch through from the west with the rescue column. If everything went perfectly, they might save half the trapped soldiers. If anything went wrong, they would all die. "May the gods watch over us," Gaius muttered, gripping his gladius. "The gods," Marcus replied quietly, touching the amulet beneath his armor. "And those who love us." They struck at the darkest hour before dawn, when human vigilance was at its lowest ebb. Marcus's team hit the Germanic supply camp like a thunderbolt, setting fire to grain stores and weapon stockpiles. The night exploded into chaos, shouting warriors, screaming horses, the clash of steel on steel. For a few precious minutes the plan worked perfectly. Germanic reinforcements rushed toward the flames, leaving their siege lines weakened. Marcus could see Roman signal fires in the distance. Varus was making his move. Then everything went wrong. A Germanic war chief, a giant of a man with ritual scars covering his arms, emerged from the smoke and pointed directly at Marcus. The barbarian's eyes held the intelligence of a seasoned commander, and he began shouting orders in his harsh tongue. Marcus realized with sinking heart that they'd been expected. Someone, a spy, a deserter, a captured Roman, had revealed the rescue plan. This wasn't chaos, it was a trap. Fall back. Marcus roared to his men. It's a trap. Fall back to. A Germanic spear took Gaius in the chest, spinning him around before he collapsed. 3 more Romans went down in the next heartbeat as enemy warriors poured out of concealed position. Marcus fought with desperate fury, his gladius dancing through enemy flesh as he tried to cover his men's retreat. But there were too many Germanic warriors, and his force was too small. They were being surrounded, cut down like wheat before the scythe. Through the melee, Marcus caught a glimpse of the main battle. Pyrrhus's rescue force had walked into an even deadlier trap, thousands of Germanic warriors rising from concealment to envelope the Romans in a killing embrace. The general himself was down, his eagles falling, his men dying in windows of Roman red. The entire rescue mission was collapsing into catastrophe. Centurion, one of his surviving men, called out, "We need to go. Now." Marcus looked around desperately. 8 men left out of 30. The supply depot was blazing merrily, but it meant nothing now. The Germanic trap was closing, and 5,000 Romans were about to die because he had delayed delivering crucial intelligence. All because he had chosen love over duty. But even as guilt threatened to paralyze him, Marcus felt the weight of the amulet against his chest. Livia's face flashed through his mind. Not accusing, not bitter, but filled with the love she had promised to remember regardless of what happened. She had told him not to let guilt poison what they shared. She had made him promise to come back to her if he could. Marcus made a soldier's decision with a lover's heart. "Break for the river," he shouted. "Stay low, stay fast, stay alive." They fought their way through the Germanic lines like men possessed, leaving a trail of enemy dead but taking losses with every step. By the time they reached the safety of Roman territory, only Marcus and 3 others remained alive. Behind them, the forest burned with the funeral pyres of 6,000 Roman soldiers. The debriefing was a nightmare of accusations and recriminations. Marcus sat in General Claudius's command tent, his armor blood-stained, and his soul heavy with defeat. The old general's face was grey with exhaustion and grief. 6,000 men, Marcus. 6,000 of Rome's finest, dead because we acted on incomplete intelligence. Claudius's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute judgment. Intelligence that should have reached us 3 weeks ago. Yes, sir. Marcus didn't try to make excuses. The facts spoke for themselves. Where were you during those 3 weeks? And don't tell me about recovering from wound. A hangnail wouldn't keep a centurion of your caliber from completing his mission. Marcus met his general's eyes steadily. I was at Villa Livia, near Tusculum. I was delayed by personal matters. Personal matters. Claudius's voice could have frozen wine. Personal matters that cost 6,000 Roman lives. Do you understand what you've done? Yes, sir. Do you? Claudius stood and began pacing. Those weren't just numbers in a casualty report, Marcus. Those were sons and fathers and brothers. Men with families waiting for them, wives who will never see their husbands again, children who will grow up fatherless. He stopped and stared at Marcus with burning eyes. All because you decided your personal happiness was more important than your sworn duty. Each word hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had tried to convince himself that his delay was reasonable, that a wounded soldier deserved time to recover. But the truth was darker and more selfish. He had stayed at Villa Livia because he had been happy there, happier than he had ever been in his life. And his happiness had killed 6,000 men. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "I request permission to resign my commission." Denied. Claudius's response was immediate and final. "You don't get to escape your guilt that easily, Centurion. You're going to live with what you've done. You're going to serve Rome for the rest of your natural life, and every morning when you wake up, you're going to remember those dead soldiers." Marcus nodded. It was no more than he deserved. However, Claudius continued, "There is one mercy I can offer. Your actions during the rescue mission, futile though it was, showed the courage and skill that made you famous. You saved 3 men's lives when you could have saved your own skin." The general returned to his seat, looking suddenly old. "I'm recommending you for the Corona Civica, for your actions in the field. A second oak crown to go with your first. A civic crown, the highest honor Rome could bestow for saving Roman lives in battle." The irony was bitter beyond words. He would be decorated for trying to rescue men who had died because of his own failures. "Sir, I don't deserve." "You don't deserve anything," Claudius cut him off. "But those 3 men you saved have families too. Their wives and children deserve to know their sacrifice meant something." He pulled out a scroll and began writing. "You're being transferred to the Britannia frontier, a cohort command on Hadrian's Wall, cold, miserable, and very far from personal temptations." Marcus understood. He was being exiled to the edge of the world, where he could do his duty without the distraction of love or happiness. It was a living death sentence, cushioned only by rank and honor. "When do I leave, sir?" "Tomorrow morning. You'll have 1 day to settle your affairs." Claudius's expression softened slightly. "Marcus, I've known you for 15 years. You've been one of Rome's finest soldiers. Don't let this one failure, however catastrophic, destroy everything you've accomplished." But as Marcus saluted and left the command tent, he knew that nothing would ever be the same. The weight of 6,000 dead Romans would follow him for the rest of his life, and the love he had found with Livia was now poisoned by the knowledge of what it had cost. He had 1 day to return to Villa Livia, to see her face one more time, and to somehow find the words to say goodbye forever. The silver amulet felt cold against his chest as he rode south through the gathering dusk, carrying news that would break both their hearts. Marcus arrived at Villa Livia near midnight, his horse exhausted from the brutal pace. The villa was dark except for a single oil lamp burning in the atrium, Livia's signal that she was waiting, hoping, praying for his return. She ran to him the moment he dismounted, throwing her arms around him with desperate joy. "Thank the gods," she whispered against his neck. "I felt it in my heart. You were in terrible danger, but you survived. You came back." "Livia." Marcus gently disentangled himself from her embrace, his face grim in the lamplight. "We need to talk." She saw it immediately, the weight of failure and guilt crushing down on him, the way his shoulders sagged as if bearing an invisible burden. Her joy faded into concern. What happened? He told her everything. The trap, the slaughter, the 6,000 Roman dead, his transfer to Britannia, and what it meant, permanent exile from everything he had come to love. When he finished, Livia was weeping silently, tears streaming down her face. "It's my fault," she whispered. "I kept you here. I made you choose between love and duty. And people died because, no." Marcus cupped her face gently, wiping away her tears. "The choice was mine. The guilt is mine. You gave me the greatest happiness I've ever known, and his voice broke. "I let that happiness blind me to my responsibilities." They held each other in the darkened atrium, 2 people whose love had come at too high a price. Outside, the night wind rustled through the garden, where they had walked and laughed and planned a future that would never come to pass. "How long do we have?" Livia asked. "Until dawn. Then I leave for Britannia. Forever." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Livia was quiet for a long moment, her mind working through the implications. Then she straightened with sudden resolve. Then we have tonight. One last night together. Livia, no. Her voice was fierce. I won't let guilt and duty steal even this from us. Those men are dead, and nothing we do now can change that. But we're alive, and we love each other, and we have a few hours left. She took his hand and led him toward her chambers. Don't make their sacrifice meaningless by refusing to accept the love they died for. In her bed they made love with desperate intensity, as if they could somehow compress a lifetime of happiness into a single night. Afterwards they lay entwined in the darkness, memorizing the feel of each other's skin, the sound of each other's breathing. I have something to tell you, Livia said quietly. Something I discovered 3 days ago. Marcus felt her tension and raised himself on one elbow to look at her face. What? I'm carrying your child. The words hit him like a thunderbolt. A child. Their child. The son or daughter Livia had prayed for, conceived in love and now growing in her womb. Are you certain? As certain as any woman can be. She placed his hand on her still flat belly. Our baby, Marcus. Created from love, not duty or politics. Joy and despair warred in Marcus's heart. A child. Something he had never dared hope for, never thought he wanted. But now, knowing that part of him would live on in this woman he loved, the loss felt unbearable. The Octavians will accept the child as legitimate, he asked. They'll have to. I'm still legally a widow in the proper mourning period. Any child born now could theoretically be Lucius's, conceived just before his death. Livia's voice was steady, but he could hear the pain underneath. Our son or daughter will have a name, an inheritance, a place in the world. And will you be safe? Safer than I've been in 3 years. A widow with a male heir has rights even the Octavians must respect. She turned in his arms to face him. Marcus, this child will be loved and protected. You don't need to worry about us. But Marcus was already thinking like a father, calculating threats and protections. I have savings, military pay from 15 years of campaigns. I'll arrange for it to be transferred to you, and my decorations, my awards. They have value. Sell them if you need to. Keep your honors, Livia said firmly. They're part of who you are. Our child should know their father was a hero. A hero? Marcus laughed bitterly. I'm the man whose selfishness killed 6,000 Romans. You're the man who saved 3 Roman lives at the cost of his own happiness. Livia countered. You're the man who chose love when it was offered, and duty when it called. You're the man I love. Marcus Aurelius Maximus. That's who our child's father will be. They talked until the stars began to fade, making plans for a future they wouldn't share. Marcus would send letters when he could, money when possible. Livia would raise their child to know honor and courage, to understand that sometimes love meant sacrifice. As dawn approached, they rose and dressed with the solemnity of priests, preparing for sacrifice. In the courtyard, Marcus's horse waited with supplies for the long journey north. The household servants gathered to see him off, their faces sad but understanding. Cassia pressed a package of food into his hands. For the journey, centurion, may the gods watch over you. Other servants added their own gifts, a warm cloak, a sharpened dagger, small tokens of affection from people who had come to care for him. Marcus was moved by their kindness. These simple people who asked nothing from him, but had given everything. Finally, only Livia remained. They stood facing each other in the growing light, trying to find words for the impossible. I'll think of you every day, Marcus, every sunrise, every sunset. I'll imagine you in the garden with our child, teaching them about honor and love. And I'll tell them stories about their father, Livia replied. How brave he was, how gentle, how much he loved us both. She pressed something into his hand, a small scroll sealed with her personal mark. Don't read this until you reach Britannia. It's a reminder of what you're fighting to protect. Marcus tucked the scroll inside his armor, next to the silver amulet that had never left his chest. Then he kissed her, one last time, gentle, tender, full of all the love they couldn't speak aloud. "Goodbye, Livia." "Not goodbye," she corrected firmly. "Until we meet again, in this life or the next." Marcus mounted his horse and rode away from Villa Livia as the sun climbed over the eastern hills. This time he did look back, seeing Livia standing in her courtyard with one hand pressed to her belly, the other raised in farewell. It was the last time he would ever see her alive. 5 years passed like a slow death on Hadrian's wall. Marcus commanded the 3rd cohort of the 20th Legion, 600 men guarding 80 miles of stone and mortar that separated civilization from the painted barbarians of Caledonia. The work was brutal, the weather harsher, and the isolation complete. But every morning at dawn, Marcus would climb to the wall's highest tower and read Livia's letter, the scroll she had given him that final morning. Her words had sustained him through 5 winters of howling wind and bitter cold. "My beloved Marcus, by the time you read this, we will be separated by half the empire. But distance cannot diminish love, nor time erase the memory of 20 perfect days. I carry our child beneath my heart, and with each breath I take, I remember that I breathe for 3 myself, our baby and the love you gave me that will never die. You think you failed in your duty, but you are wrong. Your greatest duty was to show me what love could be, and in that you succeeded beyond all measure. Be strong, my warrior, live with honor, and remember that somewhere in the world, a woman loves you with all her heart, and a child will grow up knowing their father was the finest man Rome ever produced." The child. Marcus had received no word about the birth, no confirmation that Livia had survived the dangers of childbirth. The silence from Villa Livia was absolute, perhaps by her choice, perhaps by necessity. Marcus told himself that no news was good news, that Livia was simply protecting their secret by severing all contact. But the not knowing gnawed at him like a wound that wouldn't heal. He threw himself into his duties with grim determination. The Caledonians were fierce fighters, and barely a month passed without raids across the wall. Marcus led from the front in every battle, earning his men's loyalty through shared danger and his superiors' approval through tactical brilliance. 3 times he was offered transfer to more prestigious postings. 3 times he refused. Hadrian's wall had become his penance, his monastery of stone and steel, where he atoned for the sin of putting love before duty. His men respected him, but found him distant, almost ghostly. He never drank with them, never shared in their crude jokes or complaints about the cold. When not on duty, he could be found on the wall's ramparts, staring south toward Rome, with the expression of a man looking toward paradise from the gates of Hades. The centurions lost something precious. His opsher, a grizzled Gaul named Brennus, would tell new recruits, "Don't know what, but it's eating him alive. Best soldier on the wall, but there's no joy left in him." The letters Marcus sent south were few and formal. Reports to his superiors, arrangements for his military pay to be deposited with a banking house in Rome. He never wrote to Villa Livia, though he started dozens of letters he never sent. What could he say? That he missed her every waking moment, that he dreamed of her voice and woke up calling her name, that he would trade his immortal soul for one more day in her garden. The words always seemed inadequate, so the letters remained unwritten. The messenger arrived on a bitter February morning in Marcus's 5th year of exile. The man wore the travel-stained cloak of a civilian courier, not military colors, and he seemed reluctant to deliver his news. "Centurion Marcus Aurelius Maximus?" he asked, though Marcus's scarred face and centurion's crest made identification obvious. "That's me." The messenger pulled out a sealed scroll with obvious reluctance. "I'm instructed to wait for your reply, sir." Marcus broke the seal, expecting routine correspondence from Rome. Instead, he found a letter from Gaius Octavius Mercator, not the politician who had wanted to marry Livia, but a banker in Rome who specialized in inheritance law. Honorable Centurion, it is my sad duty to inform you of the death of Livia Octavia, widow of Tribune Lucius Octavius. She succumbed to a fever on the Ides of Februarius after a brief illness. In accordance with her final testament, I am directed to inform you that she bore a son in the 7th month after your departure from her villa. The child, named Marcus Livius Octavius, is healthy and has been formally acknowledged by the Octavian family as legitimate heir. The world tilted around Marcus. The scroll fell from his numb fingers as he gripped the stone parapet to keep from collapsing. Livia was dead, and he hadn't even known she was ill, but she had borne their son, Marcus Livius Octavius, carrying both their names in the Roman fashion. Their child lived, even though she was gone forever. With shaking hands, Marcus retrieved the letter and read the rest. The Lady Livia left specific instructions regarding her son's upbringing. He is to be educated as befits a Roman nobleman, with particular emphasis on military history and the careers of distinguished soldiers. She commissioned a bronze tablet to be placed in the boy's nursery, bearing the inscription, "Your father was Marcus Aurelius Maximus, centurion of Rome, winner of 2 civic crowns, the bravest and most honorable man who ever lived." She wished the child to know his true parentage, though publicly he remains an Octavian heir. Additionally, she left instructions that upon his 18th birthday, young Marcus is to receive a sealed letter she wrote in the final days of her life. She would not tell me its contents, saying only that it would help him understand the choices his parents made for love. I am further instructed to inform you that Livia died peacefully, speaking your name with her final breath. Her last words were, "Tell him I kept my promise. Tell him love is stronger than death." Marcus read the letter 3 times before the full meaning penetrated his grief-stunned mind. Livia was gone, but she had kept their love alive through their son. She had ensured the boy would know his true father, would understand that he was conceived in love rather than duty, and she had died speaking his name. The messenger cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, is there a reply?" Marcus forced himself to focus. "Tell Gaius Octavius Mercator that I acknowledge the boy as my son. Whatever funds he needs for the child's education and care, draw them from my military accounts." He paused, thinking, "And tell him I'll come to Rome when my term of service ends. The boy should meet his father." The messenger nodded and departed, leaving Marcus alone with his grief on the windswept wall. For the first time in 5 years, the decorated centurion wept, great, racking sobs that seemed to tear his soul apart. He wept for Livia, dead at 30 without ever seeing their son grow to manhood. He wept for the child who would grow up fatherless, just as Marcus himself had done. He wept for love lost, and time wasted, and all the words they had never said. But slowly, through the grief, another feeling began to grow: purpose. For 5 years he had been a dead man walking, going through the motions of duty, without passion or hope. Now he had something to live for again, not his own happiness, but his son's future. Marcus wiped his eyes and straightened his shoulders. He had 13 more years to serve before retirement, 13 years to accumulate wealth and honors to pass on to young Marcus, 13 years to become the kind of man his son could be proud to claim as a father. The boy would need more than money. He would need connections, protection, guidance in navigating the treacherous waters of Roman politics. Marcus began making plans with the same tactical precision he brought to military campaigns. 13 years later, Marcus Aurelius Maximus stood in the garden of Villa Livia on a warm spring morning, watching an 18-year-old young man read the letter his mother had written before her death. The villa looked exactly as Marcus remembered it, roses blooming in careful profusion, the fountain still playing its gentle song, the same peaceful atmosphere that had healed his wounds so many years ago. But everything was different now. Young Marcus Livius was tall and strong, with his father's broad shoulders and his mother's intelligent brown eyes. He had grown up believing himself to be Lucius Octavius's posthumous son, raised with love by the Octavian family, but always sensing something unexplained about his parentage. Now, on his 18th birthday, the truth was finally revealed. She really loved you, the young man said quietly, looking up from his mother's letter. She writes about you like you were a god among mortals. Marcus smiled sadly. Your mother was remarkable, the finest woman Rome ever produced. He gestured to the roses blooming around them. We met in this garden. 20 days we had together. Not very long, but long enough to create something beautiful. You. Young Marcus's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the emotion in his eyes. She says in the letter that you were exiled because of your love for her. That soldiers died because you chose happiness over duty. Marcus had wondered how much Livia would tell their son about the circumstances of their separation. Apparently she had told him everything. It's, Marcus said simply. I failed in my duty to Rome, and good men died because of that failure. Your mother and I paid the price for our love. Do you regret it? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus thought of the 6,000 Roman dead, the guilt that had haunted him for 18 years, the long exile on Hadrian's wall. Then he thought of Livia's smile, her gentle hands healing his wounds, the 20 days of perfect happiness they had stolen from an uncaring world. I regret the consequences, he said finally. I regret the deaths, the pain, the years we lost, but I don't regret loving your mother. She gave me the only real happiness I've ever known, and she gave me you. Young Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing this. The letter says you're retiring from the legions, that you want to be part of my life now. Only if you want me to be. Marcus kept his voice carefully neutral. You have a family, a position, a future already planned. I'm not trying to disrupt that. I'd like to know my son, if he's willing. For a long moment father and son studied each other in the garden, where love had first bloomed between Marcus and Livia. Then young Marcus stepped forward and embraced his father, the first time they had ever touched. I've wondered about you my whole life, the young man whispered. The Octavians loved me, but I always felt like I was missing something, like there was a part of my story I didn't know. Now you know it all, Marcus replied, holding his son tight. The good and the bad, the love and the sacrifice. Your mother made sure you'd understand the choices we made. They broke apart, and young Marcus wiped his eyes with no shame. Tell me about her. Tell me about those 20 days. I want to know everything. So Marcus talked, sharing memories he had treasured for 18 years in solitude. He told his son about Livia's skill as a healer, her intelligence, her courage in the face of an uncertain future. He described their walks in this very garden, their conversations about duty and love, the way she had made him feel human for the first time in his adult life. She sounds extraordinary, young Marcus said when his father finished. She was, and she lives on in you. Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder. She would be so proud of the man you've become. Educated, honorable, kind, everything she hoped for. As the sun climbed higher, they walked through the villa together. Marcus showed his son the room where he had recovered from his wounds, the scriptorium where Livia had kept her books, the atrium where they had said their final goodbye. Every corner held memories, both sweet and bitter. In the garden center, beside the fountain, stood a small marble monument Marcus had commissioned upon his return to Rome. It bore a simple inscription, Livia Octavia, beloved mother and wife, she taught us that love is stronger than death. Father and son stood before the monument in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the remarkable woman who had shaped both their lives. What happens now? Young Marcus asked eventually. Now you live, his father replied. You honor your mother's memory by being the best man you can be. You serve Rome if you choose, or pursue whatever path calls to you. And if you're very lucky, someday you'll find someone who loves you the way your mother loved me. And you, what will you do? Marcus looked around the garden one last time, feeling a peace he hadn't known since that long ago morning when he'd ridden away from Villa Livia. I think I'll stay here for a while. The current owner has agreed to let me purchase the villa, Apparently your mother left instructions that, if I ever returned, I was to be given first option. He smiled. I'd like to tend her roses. Maybe write down our story for future generations. Make sure that what we shared isn't forgotten. Young Marcus nodded approvingly. She'd like that. In her letter, she says that love stories should be remembered, even the ones that end sadly. Especially those, Marcus agreed. They teach us that some things are worth any price, even when the price is everything we have. As they walked back toward the villa, Marcus felt Livia's presence all around them, in the roses she had planted, in the fountain where they had shared their first real conversation, in the son who carried the best of both his parents. Death had claimed her body, but love had made her immortal. That night, Marcus sat alone in the room where he had once been her lover, writing the first words of what would become his memoir. He wanted to capture every detail of their 20 days together, every word and touch and moment of joy they had shared. Future generations would read about the centurion who chose love over duty, and the widow who believed the gods had sent her a miracle. It would be a story of sacrifice and passion, of duty and desire, of love that transcended death itself. Some would condemn Marcus for his failure as a soldier. Others would understand that his greatest victory had nothing to do with battles or decorations. As he wrote, Marcus could almost feel Livia's presence beside him, guiding his hand as he set down their story for all time. She had kept her promise. Love was stronger than death. Their love lived on in their son, in the memories Marcus would preserve, in the lesson that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with swords, but with hearts willing to risk everything for a chance at happiness. Outside, the night wind rustled through the roses, carrying the scent of love, remembered and promises kept. Marcus smiled and continued writing, telling the world about the woman who had taught him that 20 days of perfect love was worth a lifetime of regret. In death, she had finally brought him home. 25 years later, an old man with silver hair sat in the same garden, reading aloud from a leather-bound manuscript to a group of wide-eyed children. These were his grandchildren. Young Marcus had married well and produced 4 beautiful offspring who adored their grandfather's stories. And so, Marcus read in his weathered voice, the centurion learned that love is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. For love teaches us what is truly worth fighting for, what is worth living for, and what is worth remembering when all else fades away. Is it really true, grandfather? Asked little Livia, named for the grandmother she had never met. Did you and grandmother really love each other that much? Marcus closed the manuscript and looked at his granddaughter, 8 years old, with Livia's same brown eyes and quick intelligence. Every word, little one, every single word. Tell us again about the roses, demanded Marcus the youngest, barely 5 and fascinated by any story involving gardens and magic. Another time, their grandfather promised. But remember this, your grandmother planted these roses as a symbol of hope. Even when everything seemed lost, even when love seemed impossible, she believed that beautiful things could grow from the darkest soil. He gestured to the flourishing garden around them. Look how right she was. As the children ran off to play, Marcus remained in his chair, surrounded by the roses that bloomed more beautifully each year. Soon he would join Livia in whatever realm awaited beyond death. But their love story would live on in their descendants, in the villa that had become a shrine to enduring passion, in the manuscript that told future generations about the power of love to transform even the darkest moments into something beautiful. The silver amulet still hung around his neck after all these years, warm with the memory of Livia's touch. Soon, very soon, he would see her again. And this time, no duty would call him away. No empire would demand his service. This time, they would have eternity. Marcus smiled and closed his eyes, feeling the afternoon sun warm on his face and the scent of roses carrying him toward dreams of brown eyes and gentle hands and love that had conquered death itself. The story was ending where it began, in a garden full of roses, with love triumphant over every obstacle the world could devise. Some victories, Marcus had learned, were worth waiting a lifetime to claim. This completes the emotional journey of Marcus and Livia, a love story that spans decades, exploring themes of duty versus desire, the price of happiness, and the ultimate triumph of love over death itself. The ending brings viewers full circle while providing the heart-wrenching emotional conclusion you requested, showing how their love lives on through their son and grandchildren, making their sacrifice meaningful and their story eternal. Inside Villa Livia's warm atrium, servants scurried about lighting oil lamps and stoking the hypercost heating system. Livia knelt beside the unconscious soldier, carefully examining his wounds by lamplight. The spear thrust to his side was deep, but clean. It had missed vital organs. His other injuries were minor cuts and bruises from his desperate ride through the forest. "Shall I send word to the garrison at Tusculum, Domina?" asked Cassia, her elderly head servant. "Let them know one of their soldiers is here." Livia hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the leather dispatch pouch. She could see the imperial seal clearly. This was indeed an important military messenger. The honorable thing would be to tend his wounds and send him on his way as quickly as possible. But as she looked at his face, strong-jawed, weathered by campaigns but still handsome, she felt something stir in her chest that had been dormant for 3 long years. Not just attraction, though that was certainly present. Something deeper, a sense of rightness, as if this moment had been ordained by the fates themselves. "No," she said finally, "not yet. He's badly hurt. It would be cruel to move him before his wounds have time to heal." She stood, smoothing her stola. "Prepare the guest chamber. Use our finest linens, and send Helena to fetch supplies from the medical storage. Clean bandages, wine for cleaning wounds, poppy juice for pain." Cassia frowned. "Domina, surely the military has their own physicians." "The storm is still raging," Livia interrupted. "It would be dangerous to travel in such weather. We'll keep him here until he recovers." She met her servant's concerned gaze steadily. It's the charitable thing to do. But charity wasn't the only motivation in Livia's heart. For 3 years, ever since her husband Lucius had fallen in Germania, she had lived under the growing pressure from his family to remarry. At 25, she was still young enough to bear children, and childless enough to be seen as a failure by Roman society. The Octavian family had been patient, but their patience was wearing thin. Marcus Octavius, Lucius's older brother, had made it clear that if Livia didn't produce an heir to carry on the family name soon, they would arrange a marriage for her, whether she wished it or not. Her own substantial dowry and the villa would pass to whatever husband they chose. She had prayed desperately to every god she could think of. Venus for love, Diana for protection, even Hertuna for a change of luck. She had made offerings at temples, consulted oracles, performed every ritual the priests recommended. All she had asked for was a sign, a chance, a way to secure her future without being forced into a loveless political marriage. And now, delivered by storm and chance, lay a Roman soldier in her atrium. As her servants carefully carried the unconscious Marcus to the guest chamber, Livia picked up his dispatch pouch. The imperial seal was intact. Whatever message he carried was still secret. She could have it delivered to Villa Claudius by one of her own servants. The right thing to do. Instead, she tucked the pouch into her private chambers. Just until he recovered, she told herself, just until she could be sure he was strong enough to complete his mission. But deep in her heart, she wondered if the gods had truly sent this man for a different purpose entirely. A purpose that had nothing to do with military dispatches and everything to do with the desperate prayers of a widow who refused to surrender her freedom. Outside, the storm raged on, as if the heavens themselves were keeping the world at bay until fate could run its course.